Alrighty, we're live.
Going live.
Yes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 5. Special guest in the house today.
Woo.
Jennifer Yao.
Was that 5 for 5 for 5?
Episode 5.
Nice.
Five.
Or was that a high five? Can't tell.
Also 5 rings, Kobe, 5 rings.
Oh,
Lumba, you're
5
first this
rings.
time.
Lumba, good morning.
Welcome, everybody. Think Tank episode 5. It's
Yo,
gonna be a fun one. Every week's a fun one.
It's true.
every
It's
week's
true.
a fun one.
Yeah. Nick's getting super comfortable. He was like 15 minutes late for our kickoff session today.
Get used to
Sleeping
it.
in, sleeping in.
Having fun now. Having fun now.
Welcome, folks. Before we get rolling, I'd love to hear just the landscape of the industry where you're from. Just like, who is anybody here practicing already? Like you're in clinic, opened up your doors, or is that going on where you're at? And if not, what does your gut say? Like, what date are you going to be opening up? What's your space or your city, country, state? What's it looking like out there? When are you opening up? Nick tells us.
So fun.
Is there anybody out there practicing already? May 11th.
11.
Oh, Cody
Ooh,
from Calgary.
next week.
Ooh.
Yeah, Calgary opened
Calgary?
up. Calgary.
Damn. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
Only virtually. So Chris, no date in mind. Chris, what does your gut say? When do you think you might be able to open up your doors? And where are you from? You're already practicing.
Rules and regulations.
Malaysia.
North of TO, Chris.
So early June. Yeah, I think we've been talking about it a lot here. We're targeting June 1st, and that's the same in Van. You guys are thinking about the same. Targeting June 1st might happen a little bit earlier. It depends. Every Monday we reevaluate, and man, this thing's just so fluid. We just really don't know. But I think the name of the game at this point is just be prepared. Be prepared.
Mhm.
It could happen at any time. You could get an announcement. And another thing that I heard super recently that actually resonated with me is, if you can, should you? And I think that, we're talking about preparation, and, if your public health official said you can open tomorrow, it's like, should you? Do you feel prepared? Do you feel like your team is prepared, they're taken care of, and your clients? So like, but that's a whole other conversation. We're here to talk about how I built my personal brand and caseload. Jennifer, yeah, you're the star of the show today.
Hello.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. Quick intros and welcome. Some of you might be new. I'm Kevin Marryshow. I am a chiropractor by trade. I graduated from New York Chiropractic College in 2011. Been a chiropractor practicing for about 8 years now. I'm currently the regional director for Myodetox in Toronto. We got Nicholas Lowe. Wait for the people. Put your 5 up again, bro. Nicholas Lowe is our Chief Operating Officer at Myodetox, graduate of UBC in Van. How long ago, Nick?
2006, so what is that, 14 years?
13 or 14 years in practice. And our special guest for today, Jennifer Yao. So Jen, you finally got to break the UBC code, and you graduated out in the UK.
That's right.
Told me the name of the university. I don't want to butcher it, so I'll let you tell the people where you
It's University of Birmingham.
Yeah, I try to
say it with that ugly Brummie accent they have.
So I'll let you know. So that 2012 is when you graduated. Been practicing for about 6 years. 6 years now.
Yeah, six to 7. Yeah.
So you're officially the youngest person we've had on ThinkThank today. So appreciate you bringing.
I'm not in those dinosaur years as Nick and
old guys slowing this down. So welcome everybody to ThinkThank episode 5. It's crazy that we're already 5 weeks into this idea that we felt the need to launch. Actually, we've been talking about this for a really long time. It's unfortunate it took COVID for us to bring this thing to life, but we've talked a lot about collaborating more in the space, talking to more peers and colleagues, and the whole purpose of ThinkThank is just to support you guys, thinking differently, supporting you guys with a framework of thought, and just a safe space for us to share our thoughts, opinions, ideas, fears, desires, and that's what this thing was built for. Been getting incredible feedback week to week. I appreciate you guys carving your time out to be here with us. As we talked about last week, it's a noisy space right now. There's just like content being thrown at you, 15 to 20 emails a day. So you kicking it with us for this hour means a lot to us. It definitely confirms that you're finding some value in what we're talking about, and super excited about today because I think you might get the most value out of this one. Every single week we've been iterating on the conversations. We went from building relationships to building your community to pursuit of clinical excellence, and today is almost like a case study. So we're gonna unpack Jennifer Yao and your journey, how you built your brand, how that evolved into the community that you built, and how you chased clinical excellence, and eventually what that meant to you building your caseload. So we're gonna kind of dissect Jen piece by piece, how all of the makings of Jen came together to create who she is now. Currently clinic director at our CASELOAD clinic in Vancouver. Congratulations on that. When would you guys open? Day one?
End of Feb, like mid-Feb.
Mid-Feb.
Just a month before it's
closed. Over a month before it's taken. Clearly you weren't prepared. We weren't prepared to just for a month, but we'll get back to it soon. Okay, cool. Let's get rolling. Disclaimer as always, guys, this is just our opinions. This is just our the way that we view the space, and just an open conversation with us. If you're looking for any legal advice or any counsel, make sure that you consult with your local association or college. Cool. You guys want to jump into it?
Let's
do it.
Q&A in the Q&A section. Mentioned this in our last wrap up with our post-session email. We've done a terrible job getting to all the questions, and we want to make sure that we leave as much time as possible to answer your questions. If you have any questions, make sure you jump in the Q&A, put it in there. We'll probably field it throughout the discussion, and if not, we'll make sure there's time at the end to be able to answer any questions that you may have, whether it's a question about what we talk about today or previously past ThinkTank webinars. Jump in there with those. Alrighty. So how I built my personal brand and caseload. Just jump into the agenda here. Hopefully my laptop's not as laggy today. Cool. So here's a little bit of our agenda. We're going to be breaking down case study. I guess every week we talk about either basketball or Nike. Apologize for that, guys. It's just brand that we're enamored by, and I think it's just easy for everybody to get. Everybody knows Nike. You've seen a lot of their activations, campaigns, things that they've rolled out, so it makes it very easy to paint color with Nike. Then we'll toss over to Jen. Jen's going to talk about her own personal story, how she built her own brand. Then we'll dissect it all the way down to how that evolved into caseload management, and just a bunch of tips and clinical pearls and things that you guys could implement tomorrow as you prepare for reopening, and whether it is reopening, things that you can implement right now. Again, we always want to be talking both short term, what can you do today, and long term, how can you set yourself up for better success in the future. Cool. So Nike Vaporfly 4%. Nick was obviously super excited to talk about this and have this be our opening case study. Nick's a huge runner. He probably has like 4 or 5 pairs of these that he rotates in his closet. There it is, right?
There it is.
Nobody's surprised, man. Nobody's surprised. But
off his foot.
So we'll kick it off with this. If you could just sound off in the chat. Anybody know who this is? Where this is? What this is? Anybody familiar with this picture? So this is a picture from Nike's campaign, Breaking 2, which was, if you're unfamiliar, this was their shot at trying to break the 2-hour marathon barrier. Nobody has ever done it in the history of running, or at least not recorded. So the purpose of this campaign was let's get the entire world to rally around the idea that we can break this barrier. And what we're trying to get at here is the correlation and the alignment between you have a brand and an audience and a campaign and activation you're trying to build around a product. And the product itself is this, which Nick already corrected me. This is not actually the 4%. This is Kipchoge's actual, the shoe that he ran in. But the point here is, you have a brand that's being built. You have a campaign being built around delivering a product, and literally showing how so the whole goal with this 4% is that this shoe can save 4% economy throughout your entire run. And Nike built in a lot of tech, a lot of research behind delivering that message. But what they did is they used this Breaking 2 campaign to put it on display. Right? So as opposed to talking about the research and development behind the shoe, they use this campaign to deliver that message for them. So the whole purpose here is, you think about Nike building this activation. What's the purpose of it? The purpose of it was to showcase this product, right? And you build this whole haze around, I want to put on this shoe. I want to be a part of this movement. I think the campaign was breaking barriers, and I want to break barriers as well. And what they did is they took this global campaign and then they created activations at every single Nike store. So us at Myodetox, we were blessed with the opportunity to head out to Miami and be a part of the Miami Marathon, where there was a local campaign activation going on around Breaking 2 and around the launch of this shoe. And I for one, it was an incredible experience. They had like those poster boards where people were writing their name and the time of the that they completed their race, whether it was a marathon or a half, and they built all of these campaigns and activations literally around this product. And what we're doing here is literally setting the stage for when Jen starts to talk about her story. Like, Jen is going to start to talk about like how she built her reputation all in an effort to bring people in her space to experience her product. And that's what Nike was able to accomplish with this campaign. Nick, I'd love to hear your take on it. I know you're a big runner and it speaks a lot to you.
Yeah, I mean, this particular campaign, I always say, is like probably the most successful campaign that I've ever seen, ever. Which is we obviously follow a lot of brands and we see a lot of campaigns, but I think the first thing to remember is Nike's very clear on what they are as a company or who they are as a company, and they don't look at themselves as a footwear company or an apparel company. They look at themselves very much as an inspirational company as well as an innovation company. And I think with the 4%, they really brought both of those things to light, which is in the shoe, we're going to put a carbon plate in the actual sole as a new piece of technology that has never been seen before, right? And the inspiration is going to be, well, we're going to tell this whole story of Kipchoge trying to break 2 hours in a marathon, right? And this is where a company looks at product and brand, and the product pushes the brand and the brand pushes the product, right? And that's going to be, the perfect recipe for success, right? And, you put this slide up, and Nike was able that year to develop probably the strongest content they can ever imagine, right? To support all the claims that they made about this one shoe that makes you 4% faster, energy saving, all that kind of stuff. This is from 2016. World records were broken, personal records were broken. Whether the technology worked or the story and the aura of the brand pushed everyone in the world to, either train harder or believe the shoes actually made us faster. It all worked, right? At the end of the day, it worked because they have case studies on case studies on case studies where people actually broke records, right? Out of the 6 big marathons here, Tokyo, Boston, London, Berlin, Chicago, New York, you look at all the winners, first place, second place, third place, males and females, and the majority of them were the Nike Vaporfly 4%, right? And you can't ask, from a brand perspective, you can't ask for better content than that, right? And you mentioned Miami. Like I know for myself, like when this campaign came out, I switched to Nike as my primary runner. I used to wear Adidas a lot actually, when I was all over that Ultra Boost thing back in the day. All the Boost technology was the thing back in 2015. When Nike came out with this campaign, I felt like they bought all my emotions back. Right. And I remember buying the 4% back in the day when it first came out, like nobody could buy these shoes. We went to the Miami Marathon, and I never ran with the 4%. You know, I took them out at the Miami Marathon, even though we didn't actually run the Miami Marathon. It was just it was the shakeout run. But I took out the 4% because I was like, yo, I gotta be one of the fastest guys in the shakeout run, and nobody's actually even racing. But I took these shoes out, and I felt amazing. You know, again, everything that they had sold me on, I bought, which was, you know, I felt faster, I felt better, I felt, you know, all the kind of things that they wanted us to feel. And to this day, you know, every time I want to run fast, what do? I take out the 4%. Any race or any sort of day where I need to beat Drew or something like that, I'm gonna take out that 4%, because it's gonna make me feel a little bit faster. And every single time it's worked, right? So
I remember that. I remember I was leaving the cool down in front of Nike Miami, and you came streaking in. That was hilarious. But
it was these exact shoes right here, and to this day, right?
Still in the flesh.
Yeah, so Sarah, you bring up a great point. You know, it brings up a new conversation around, you know, mechanical doping in sport. And, you know, by far, like, as much as, you know, this was a successful and positive campaign, there's a lot of controversy around it as well. Like, should you be allowed? Like, how is this any different from, you know, pharmaceutical doping? And like, I completely understand the angle. I guess what we're getting at is, like, what it did is it supported it made people believe. It made people believe that they can do more. And I think that there's a lot to be said, and there's a whole conversation just around the technology and the product itself. And, you know, even if that was a 1% of the entire thing, and 99% was just you believing, I think there's a huge conversation to be had there. And, you know, I guess the alignment with our space and what we do, and Jen, I'll toss it over to you in a second, is I think that, you know, whether we call it 20, 25%, 30%, 50% of, you know, our clinical reasoning and our hard skills and what we bring to the table, it's not the entire pie. It's not the entire therapeutic alliance that we're building. And there's a level of trust. You have to support people in their ability to believe that you can get them to their goals and whatever they're aspiring to do. And I think it's again, we can go all day on this, and I don't want to take too long on this conversation, but it's like the point we're trying to drive home here is that you have a brand, and you have an activation or a campaign or something that you're trying to draw attention to this product that you feel is going to serve the public in a way that's going to move humanity forward. And humanity in your case is just going to be your own personal community. And again, it starts with getting people's attention, building their trust, but your product again has to stand on its own. Cool. Jen, floor is yours. So I think, like I said, I opened this up saying that I think that this is going to be a really impactful conversation, because, you know, Jen is going to look and feel like a lot of you folks out there. Jen's been practicing for 6 years, you know, had 6 years to start to better understand, you know, what your value system is, what your why is, you know, make mistakes, go in direction that didn't feel super true and genuine to yourself. So I think it'll be really impactful to hear your own story, starting off right here with just your own personal brand. Like, how did you build that? How did you build your reputation?
For sure. Thanks, Kev. So, I mean, I think you have to take it back to the very beginning of my career as a physio. And I think I can speak for a lot of people here as well, but as a junior therapist, you know, my first couple of years just starting out, my main focus was on basically the what and the how. So, like, what was I going to do to become a better therapist? Like, how was I going to build my caseload as quickly as possible? And so the answer I had to that was essentially like take as many courses as possible, gain as much clinical knowledge as possible. So I took like IMS, I took concussion courses, I took vestibular courses, FMS, like you know, specializations in shoulders, hips, ankles. Like I really kind of just like dove right into it. And I guess we can categorize that as like hard skills, right? So it was just like building knowledge, clinical knowledge. And don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of like importance and significance around that, but it wasn't until probably, you know, later on in my career that I start changing the focus and asking myself more so like, what was my why? Like what was my purpose? Why was I doing all these things? Like, what is the long game, like what I want to get out of this at the end of the day. And that essentially just kind of, rephrase my programming and kind of brought me down to, what was going to really make me unique. Courses, I think, they can be replicated. The therapist next to me can take the same courses, read the same textbooks. They can do equally as good of a job, but something that can't really be replicated was myself and my personality and what I could really bring forth to my sessions with my clients. So then I started doing a lot of like inner kind of I guess like self-awareness and really just start to realize like what my values were as a person. And at that time, like I valued connection and I valued happiness. And it was like growing up, I was always like a pretty fun, lighthearted person. I always like to put smiles on people's faces. And so I essentially just made it a point where like a promise almost to myself and my clients that every single person that came through the door, I wanted them to leave happier than when they first walked in.
Right.
And that was it. It was as simple as just like, that was my focus. That was kind of my why. That was my purpose. And I remember a very specific, a story, if you will, or like a situation where I was at Mayo already, probably about 6 months or so into working Mayo, probably like 3.5 so years into my physio career. And I had a woman in her like mid 40s, very nice lady, and she came in for her first session. And then I asked her, as I would with any other client, like, hey, how'd you hear about Mayo? What brings you in today? And she was like, oh, well, I just kind of live nearby. And I just Googled you guys and I looked on the website. And then she's like, but I chose you very specifically. And I was like, oh, like, how come? Right. And she's like, well, I was like on the website, I looked at a bunch of photos of people's, bios, and your photo really spoke to me. Like I was really attracted to that photo. And if you guys haven't seen like a photo on the website, it's basically me like laughing hysterically. I've got like super small Asian eyes, like they're small already, but there's like my eyes don't exist. Like my mouth is like super wide open, just all teeth. And I was just being my most true and authentic self in that photo. And I guess it kind of came across to her, and she was like, you just seem like such a nice and genuine person and fun person to work with. And that's who I wanted to have as my therapist. And I was like, whoa, like that was probably, I would say, like my turning point in understanding and really owning the fact that like, this is who I am. No one can take this away from me. Like,
Right.
This is what makes me unique. And I knew I had that kind of ability and that power to like bring out smiles in people's faces. And when I start essentially combining that with my hard skills and the courses I took previously, it just kind of added more color and more flair to my clinical knowledge. And through that, I was able to build more like genuine and authentic, and really be able to like connect with people and form like a comfortable environment for them, allow them to have fun and really be themselves during the session, and just showcase like a lot of empathy towards these human beings. At the end of the day, like they're not a case study, they're not a just a person that you learn in school as a textbook, right? These are human beings. You're dealing with human emotions here. Right. Yeah, so I would say, just like, I think we talked about this in kind of previous think tanks, just the art of science and art and science kind of combining together to create this like beautiful symbiotic kind of relationship with clients. And I would say that's kind of how I would say built my personal brand, if you will, was really just through that.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, I got goosebumps, to be honest. These stories, they speak to me, because like it's conversations that we're having all the time, right? Like I get hit up personally, just people asking me like, how did you build your brand? How can I go about building my brand? If we want to get super tactical, you mentioned your profile pic and your biography, and I think those things don't get talked about enough. I think the consumer is very informed now, and they want to know more about you than they ever have in the past. So the more that you can offer them, and again, even if it is you telling a story in your picture and your smile is huge, and you at some point you decided like happiness is what I want to deliver my clients, and happiness is spoken through your photo, it's spoken through your bio, it's spoken through your Instagram profile, it's spoken to like how you show up at events in your community. Like all these things matter, and once you define that, you know that you can't show up to anybody and not be that person, because then you're just not being true to your brand. And sometimes it's going to be easy, and sometimes it's going to take added extra work, but all those things matter, all the details matter. So I think if we were to bring it all the way home, like this very much speaks to your story. You better understood who you were, and I guess the rest of this webinar we're going to start to talk about like how did you start to express that? How did you build an audience and a fan club, so to say, around your unique value? And like you said, anybody can work on any particular part of the body. We're all chasing clinical excellence. That's why we got into this field. But your unique value is really what's going to set you apart and build the shared value between yourself and your clients. So it's a pick that Nick likes a lot. So it comes back up.
Love
often,
it. So
but
cute.
it's a beautiful picture of the ability to share unique value and find your unique value it's not easy. It's not easy to separate yourself from the crowd. I think that's why we talk a lot about Nike, basketball, all of these players outside of our space, because I think that our space doesn't have a lot of color. Generally, clinical excellence is the one thing we're all chasing. We can never take our foot off the gas pedal when it comes to that. But the ability to build unique value and, create a brand that differentiate itself, it's not easy in our space because there's not a lot of other players to look at. And going outside of the industry matters a lot, because you can draw a lot of parallels to what you're building and what you're doing. And we talked about it a couple of webinars ago. Like you gotta look at brands that you're enamored by and see how they're separating themselves in the marketplace, because you can probably draw a lot of parallel comparisons to what you're doing and how you're building your own brand. Cool. So let's get into content strategy. And Jen, I'm gonna have you jump back all over this, but a couple of weeks ago, we started to talk about the funnels, the marketing funnel, top of the funnel content, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. I think what we really started to land at is that you're trying to get somebody to enter as low on the funnel as possible. And the lower they get, it's literally because of trust. And as you can see here, circle of trust is built through your community. That's how you get people coming in at the middle of the funnel. How do you drive them all the way to the bottom of the funnel and then into loyalty? That's your product, right? You're building this brand, you're building this community in an effort to bring people into your clinic so that you can deliver your product and serve the people that you seek to serve. And the better you deliver this sound product, the more likely it is you are to drive these 80%ers down to your brand ambassadors being your 20%. So this question came up actually when we had Christina on ThinkThank, which is, I think we've started to really identify and people are starting to find value. Like, I got to figure out how I'm going to build my community. And again, back to unique value, the first thing you think about is gyms, fitness spaces. Like a lot of the same players start to come up, but it only matters if those things align with your own value. So Jen, I'd love for you to start to unpack this. Like, how do you start to think about building your own community? What did that look like? And how did it reflect your own personal values?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it really, again, kind of came down to like, what kind of situation would bring out my most authentic self. And so at that time, and I still am, I was really passionate about CrossFit and tennis. So tennis is something I've played ever since I was a kid, like 6 years old. And so I love the game. I love the strategy. I love just kind of playing like a casual hit. And that was a community I was already involved in. Mm-hmm. So it was an easy kind of way for me to kind of segue my skills, not just as a therapist, but also my passions behind it, and really connect with that tennis community. And then every single client that came in that, just kind of kickstarted a conversation of like, hey, you play tennis too? Like, hey, so do I. It just, became a lot more genuine. And there was this kind of subconscious layer of just trust that gets formed because you have a similar interest, and everything else then, in terms of helping them through their pain or their injury just became much more believable and trustworthy, where they could then take their journey of rehab kind of to that next level, because we knew we could always connect back on something like tennis.
Right.
So, you know, after then seeing, say, for example, like one client like that, they would go and tell, you know, 5 of their other tennis friends. And the next thing you know, I was seeing more so what we call like hot leads coming in. And that's how, you know, I kind of went from top of the funnel to more so middle and then bottom of the funnel, where clients just had this general expectation of just like, hey, I wasn't just coming in to see someone that knew how to treat a tennis injury. I was like coming in to see someone that was like gonna make my exercises fun, and the session was gonna be lighthearted, and I was gonna be able to connect with them, and also, you know, recover from my tennis injury.
Right.
So that was kind of my thing. And then in terms of CrossFit, like that was in a community that I started getting into probably for like 3 years. I've been doing CrossFit, and it was new to me, but it was exciting. So you know, kind of the same idea. It wasn't forced. Like, it was a community that was I was easily able to kind of slip into. And an example I did from like a community perspective is I, with the help of Myo, actually set up a recovery tent at my own CrossFit gyms, one of our CrossFit competitions, right? So it just kind of was able to give me a lot more credibility, not just as a therapist, but also really showcase that, hey, this is something I love to do, and I'm just combining my passions for like sport activity and with my passion for physio, and just like putting the two together. Yeah, I don't really know how to say it. It was just a very organic and natural thing to do, but it really started with knowing yourself, and like, or knowing myself, and really understanding what I valued and how I was gonna bring that forth, and what I wanted to do as a therapist. It was my purpose, was my bigger purpose, was my long game.
Got it. Yeah, super well said. Like, the 2 words that kind of jumped out there was organic and natural. And I think the general feel is if you can't check those 2 boxes off, then it's probably not a community that you should be a part of or chasing. And Nick and I talk about this all the time when we, you know, get questions around, you know, what niche should I chase? What market should I chase? It's like, you shouldn't really chase anything. You should just, like you mentioned, you were already a part of that CrossFit community, and you talked about the idea of hot leads. Like, if we unpack that more, that became a hot lead community partner for you because there was already a relationship built and a level of trust. And I think we miss our own Rolodex first before we start to go chasing, you know, I guess what we would call cold leads, which is, I'm chasing that company because, I don't know, there's a lot of people there, they have a lot of relationships, and less about what relationships do I already have and what already exists. Regardless of the numbers, your ability to penetrate that community becomes that much easier. Anything to add, Nick? This idea of this middle of the content.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we talk about it again. You mentioned kind of all the time about, you know, being genuine and authentic, and really just honest with yourself. You know, I think the biggest thing for building your personal brand, or the fastest way to build your personal brand, is going to be consistency, right, in content delivery. And if you want consistency in content delivery, then it has to be something that you value. Because if it's not, then you're not going to be consistent, because it's going to be a chore, right? So, and it's kind of like, well, then that's very easy, right? You just like always do what you love. Well, that is actually the truth, right? Because if you go and deliver value to the communities that value the same things, then it's not really consistency. That's just part of your day-to-day life, right? So, you know, I always try to tell people, if you know, you really want to build your personal brand, create content around what you value, not what others value, because your tribe will emerge, whether it's small or big, whether it's fast or slow, right? If you're trying to create content around what others value first, you're going to lose steam very fast. And you're probably going to lose yourself, right? So I think what Jen did is exactly that. You know, it's you know, obviously staying true to herself and just doing the things that she loves to do, which is CrossFit and tennis. And I'm just going to create shared value in communities that I'm already a part of, right? So
yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Jen, if you don't mind, just to get a little, I guess, tactical putting out some gems in, just like strategies that you've implemented from like, I guess, a short-term standpoint, like, you know, through COVID, and you're obviously not in these CrossFit gyms. Like, how have you supported your community like during these times?
Yeah, I think it comes back to like the innate ability for myself at least, that I always kind of want to better myself in whatever it is I do, right? Better my craft. So, you know, tennis is one of those things that I was really into, but right now I can't play tennis. Like I can't, especially during COVID, like I can't go out into my tennis community and connect with these people. So, I actually like signed up for a tennis course and a webinar and during this time, and I just wanted to kind of learn more about the biomechanics behind like the serve or the forehand, the backhand, court play, court strategy, like how to play up front at the net, what does baseline play kind of look like, and at the end of the day, it was really just like it was an easy decision for me to make, especially at a time like this, because I wanted to learn more about that. I wanted to dive into my passions for tennis, and
Right.
and I'm excited because you know, at the end of the day, this will kind of kick back into being in the clinic and pursuing more clinical excellence and being able to deliver, you know, a level of expectation that I think my clients have for me. And so I kind of see it as like, you know, going from the level of expert, you know, you know how to play tennis, sure, you have a passion about it, but you want to kind of go into like mastery mode where you can really master the concepts of it and be able to not just teach others, but also like inspire and empower other people, clients included, to go down that route. So that would be kind of more like little things I've done on the side, but with like that bigger picture of still going back to what you value.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you move the needle right to the next conversation, which was about, you know, your product funnel and, you know, the pursuit of clinical excellence. And I think often, like you talked about your tennis course, we look at, you know, a strategy like that as like a very long-term play. It'll take you time to better understand, you know, the mechanics of tennis and learn this course and so on and so forth. But you found short-term value in that, which is, people that play tennis is my community. I'm going to take this course in an effort to better serve them. And I think what's really undervalued now is we're in a time where you can communicate with your community what you're doing in an effort to better serve them. Where, you know, we had Drew on last week. Drew, the only way that Drew could in his heyday was wait until somebody actually came into the clinic to show them I've been working on my craft. Right? We have a megaphone that we probably underutilize, where, you know, whether it's you know, showing content around the fact that you're doing this course, as you're improving your own craft in an effort to better support that community. I think we always think about support as just showing up as like a physical activation or event, or like actually doing content, and less about there's just this huge pie and different ways that you can support your community. And yours was chasing clinical excellence and just better understanding like, how can I support my tennis community? Right. And like it because you know your values just made it that much easier. Like, what course am I going to take? There's a quadrillion courses you can take. I'm going to take the course that best serves my community. And it makes the process of decision making that much easier, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Right. Because we talked about it, I think, last week, and we were just asking throughout the question, like, what courses have people taken that they find valuable or really change the way that they practice? And like, you know, there was probably like 25 that were listed there. It's like, which one should I choose? Like, I don't know, like, which one will best help you serve your community? I can't really make that decision for you, but if you know who that is, it makes it that much easier to choose whatever course makes the most sense for you. Cool.
Yeah, 100%. I think it just goes back to like, simply said, like, just do what you love and enjoy the process. Right? It never will feel like work, but if you start signing up for a bunch of courses, just to kind of have a bigger repertoire of skills, and, you know, skill acquisition is important, but if you're doing it without like a deeper purpose and you're not linking it back to your values, it's going to feel like a lot of work, and you kind of get to that point of burnout, which happened to me as well. So yeah.
Cool. Nick, anything on product funnel?
Yeah, I mean, you guys already kind of talked about it. I think it's important to always point out that, you know, I think a successful therapist or a successful clinician is, you know, not necessarily what you know or how much you know. It goes back to, your purpose and what you value. And, I'll talk a little bit about Jen, because I think it's important. Jen came into our company with a very clear indication of what she wanted, which was to own a clinic and to become a clinic owner in our space. And why this is important is because, I always tell people, like, entrepreneurship and clinic ownership, it's kind of a goal, and it's a what, and it's not ultimately the purpose of what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. And if you dissect that further, in Jen's situation, it's like, well, she wants to be a clinic owner because what she values is probably accountability, right? She wants to be responsible and accountable to a team and to herself. She wants to live and die by her own sword, and she wants to do all these things. And for us as leaders and mentors in a company, we know that values drive action. We've talked about this from week to week to week, right? Jen's success as a clinician, to me, was inevitable because she understood her own values, right? What she downloads and learns is just going to continue to add more tools to her toolkit, right? But at the end of the day, she was motivated to be successful because she was able to uncover her own core values from the start, right? She was self-motivated to learn more, to take more courses, to build around communities she values, right? And I think it's important to remember that, like we all like to take courses and learn more things, but the purpose of doing that isn't always super clear to us. We just do it for the sake of doing it. Right. When you have like a deep-seated purpose, you're going to be successful. You know what I mean? You take a course, you use it, you don't use it. You know why you did it. You know what I mean? So, and I think Jen was very successful in doing that, right? So.
Yo, Jen, it feels like an award ceremony. Like you're about to come up.
Give me my trophy.
Your trophy, Athlete of the Year. Cool. So I think that leads us right into our next conversation, which is around caseload management, right? So like at the end of the day, we're running a business, and running the business well and successfully allows us to serve more people and continue to build a bigger audience and a bigger brand that's able to impact a larger community, right? But then when it comes to caseload management, there's a level of, whether it's metrics or KPIs or performances, like you need a framework around how are you going to check off the boxes that what I'm doing is successful and I'm on the right path. And, everybody that works with us or interacted with Nick, everybody knows Nick is our operations guy. He's our business guy. He brings metrics, numbers, these boxes to check off to draw color on, am I on the right path? So that's what we're going to get into now. So I was talking to Jen about this before we jumped on here, and just like ideas around, again, we're going to get super tactical now. We talked to Drew about this last week, asked him the question on, like, you build your brand, you're driving people into your clinic. That's the purpose of building your community, to bring people into your clinic so you can serve them. Like, what is that first session like, Jen? Like, what are you thinking about? What are some of the boxes you have to check off that is going to better support somebody's journey, get them to their goals, and keep them on the treatment plan? So basically, how are you getting somebody from session 1 to 2?
Yeah, I mean, basically, for me, it was always about, we learned this in school, but like ask them about what their goals are. Ask your clients what their goals are. What do they want to get out of the session? And but I took a deeper dive into that, right? So for example, clients could come in and be like, hey, yeah, I want to be able to play in the Stanley Tennis Open this summer. Okay, cool, right? But understanding like the deeper reason behind why they want to do that, I think gives puts a lot of context, and it helps you cater your treatment plan or even your whole first session to kind of line it up and meet that goal at the end. So one thing I've always done is, just ask them about their goal, but like really get to know the details of their goal, why they're doing it, and you'll learn like a huge story behind them. And essentially then you're just connecting with that client, you're connecting with another human being because you might have similar goals, right? And then I always finish the session off, it doesn't matter what we did, I always connect it back to their goals, right? So say I gave them specific exercise and, clearly they're not going to reach their goal in the first session. However, I link it back to how this exercise or what we did today is going to start them on that journey. And it kind of leaves them, you know, feeling motivated, inspired, and also wanting to come back for more. And that's kind of what I find a lot of success into getting them in back for a second session. And you do the same whole process again, right? You're just like going, always tying it back to what their goals are. You're making it really specific, making it really unique to the person in front of you. Like there's no cookie cutter way of doing this.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say like that's kind of my main thing. The other thing that I didn't realize I was doing until honestly, like you kind of made me reflect on it, was just like being a good human being. I know it sounds cliche, but just remembering like little details about people. So I'll like ask them like their kids' names, or and I'll put like a little date, like little notes in Jane. Like I'll if they start talking about like a vacation that they went on, I'll remember exactly where they went to. And so I can kind of bring it back up later in the second or third session, right? Hey, how's your vacation? Oh, and most of the time they're surprised, like, oh, wow, like you remember that? I'm like, yeah, hey, like I care about you, right? And even like something that I started doing more so last year was, you know, some clients would come in on the day of their birthday. I was like, why the hell are you here for therapy on the day of your birthday? Like go celebrate. But that's because they prioritize their health first, right? And so I would actually like write them a birthday card and give it to them on the day of, and almost like as a way to thank them for giving me their time as well. And I think it's like little things like that that just kind of puts a human, like emotional kind of component on it. And I didn't realize I was doing that, but I think what inspired me to start really thinking that way was one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou. And she's like, people will always forget, you know, the things that you said and things you did, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. Mm-hmm. And that just always spoke to me. Yeah. It's funny that I actually learned about that quote through Maya. It was one of the decks that Nick gave one of the first days I joined, and I was just like, oh, whoa, that's kind of, I really just resonated with me, and kind of, goes back to like my why. It was just like making a difference in people's lives and being able to connect with them on that kind of level. No one can take that away from you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we call it caseload management, but like, I personally hate that concept. Like it sounds very technical, and it's not technical. One of the earliest things Vin told me, he was on the other day, co-founder of Myodetox. Like I just asked him, like as a super young therapist, like how do I get successful in this space? I kind of know what I want to do and who I want to work with, and you just got to care. And like instead of caseload management, it's like it's really just care. Like if that was the title of this topic, it would completely flip the optics in how you interpreted this, because like caseload management sounds very technical, and it's like it's not a technical process. Jen, you've been hitting all of Nick's heartstrings that entire talk. Like everybody knows Nick, they know he's a card guy. Nick loves a good card. But it leads us into this analogy that I heard Nick mention first, and I think it draws a lot of color to this idea of we'll keep it at caseload management because that's the concept that everybody just gets. But Nick has this incredible dating analogy I think draws a lot of color.
Yeah, you know, obviously a lot of Myo people have heard me talk about and compare like customer journey to dating journey for a long time, because I always think it's like easy to compare and it's easy to understand when you just look at it from a dating perspective. And you know, I think a few things to keep in mind along like that graph that we saw is, you know, at what point like along the customer journey, what are some of the key milestones along that journey that will give you the maximum chance of success? And when we say maximum chance of success is like, what is the highest lifetime value that you can give a client? And when you look at it from a dating analogy, you have to remember that like that initial session with your client is kind of like a first date. That's all it is, right? And when you have a first date with somebody, you have to remember a lot of people are willing to go on first dates, right? And because for the most part, there's nothing to lose. You know what I mean? I haven't been single for a long time. I'm married, but I assume that if I was single, I'd probably go on a lot of first dates because you want to meet a lot of people, right? But when you're thinking about it from dating perspective, well, what are the two key milestones that like give you the maximum chance of success for that particular relationship? Well, if your date is willing to go on a second date with you, it's probably a very strong predictor that they're actually into you, right? And then the second thing is if your date wants you to meet their parents, then you're basically exclusive. And they actually see a future together with you, right? So at Myo, we just look at it from a dating perspective. Well, you have two key milestones that if you can hit these two milestones at any point, then the chance of lifetime value is very high. The chance of building a network effect is very high, right? So the second date and meet the parents. If you look at what KPIs or what metric do we measure that allows us to indicate that this is successful? Well, the first KPI, we talked about this last time, right? The rebooking rate on first session or after first session. What is an indicator of success? Based on all the data that we've ever collected, 80% is good. You know, out of 10 first dates, 8 out of the 10 are willing to go on a second date with you, right? A lot of our therapists are 9s. A lot of our therapists are 6s and 7s. You know what I mean? And it's a good indicator because that second date is probably more powerful of a predictor than the third date or fourth date, right? The fact that they're even willing to give you another chance means you didn't screw up on the first date, right? And the second thing is meet the parents. Meet the parents just means at what point are they willing to refer their own family to see you? Right. And we all know we hold our families dear to our hearts. You know, to this day, when my mom texts me, hey, you know, my knee hurts or my arm hurts or whatever, you know, can you book me an appointment? I think really hard about who I book my mom with. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because that's my mom. You know, not everybody can see my mom, you know what I mean? And we know that family always is held very dear to our hearts. So meet the parents just means a direct referral per client. A measurement that, you know, we've talked about this again the past few episodes is make sure you're measuring your direct referrals, right? If it's a family or friend referral, even better. Right. How many direct referrals per client is considered successful? We use a number of 2, right? And why 2, why not 1? You know, if one person refers one other person over the course of their entire journey, remember, it's not after 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, it's over their entire lifetime. If they refer one person, then that's what we call linear growth, right? It's one person to one person to one person to one person. What we want is a network effect. Mm-hmm. And a network effect means is exponential growth. If one person tells 2 people to come back to see you, right? And especially if they're family and friends, if every single client refers 2 other people to come see you, then you have a real network effect in your community. That's going to be a self-sustaining caseload, basically. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's just 2 key milestones to look out for is number 1, the second date, and number 2, meet the parents. Right? Because we can look at that journey and go session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can continue to look at that journey. And is it more sessions the better? Well, not necessarily, because as soon as somebody refers somebody else to come see you, then they're already a fan. Right. That could come after session 1. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That could come after session 10. And there's no way of telling that unless you measure these 2 very key metrics, right? So,
the infamous dating analogy. It's out there. Everybody knows it now. Like, I mean, I highly recommend. I'm leaving this slide up for a while for a reason. You should take a picture of this because, you know, it could all be so simple. And if you broke it down to these 2 particular milestones, and we thought about this entire concept of caseload management, like this is powerful here. This is powerful. This is like 80-90% of what your strategy really should be, and the rest of it is kind of details that builds off of these 2 concepts right here. Okay, cool. I want to jump into some questions before we get close to wrapping up here. I got a question from Larry, and Jen, I'll toss this to you because I think this already speaks to the story you're already telling. Larry's just pretty much asking about like how does he tell his own story, and I guess it's back to the concept of unique value. And whether you're a chiro or a physio, and yourself, you're a physio. How do you tell your own story that makes you unique from, I guess, every other physio that's at your clinic or in your community?
Honestly, I think just who you are and the kind of like what you bring to the table naturally just shows for itself. When you start to really overthink, like, oh, what's my story? What can I tell people? It kind of feels like you're still trying to paint a specific picture, and it never really comes across authentic. So um, I would say, like, as long as you go back to what we talked about this whole time, is just like what you value, and for me it was like that happiness and that connection, and everything else just kind of came naturally on top of that. Like, but you still have to, like, to be a good therapist, you still have to have like a certain amount of clinical skills and hard skills behind it to support it. But it's one of those things, like, don't try to fake it. Like the whole fake it till you make it thing, I was just like, don't fake your personality. Like, just be yourself, be who you want to be, and yeah, it'll just show.
Right, for sure. Yeah, if I could like add more to that, I think that who you are and the product you deliver is not going to resonate with every single person, and that's the point. It is for a particular person, right? Like the idea of fun and happiness in a session, it doesn't sit well with everybody. Not everybody wants to laugh and have a good time at their sessions. They want it to be super serious, very, very education oriented, and that client is going to be served by somebody else. And I guess, Larry, to drive it home on your question there, is that like you need to figure out what separates you and just stay true to that. And Nick mentioned this earlier, don't finesse that message based on who's in front of you. If happiness and having a good time is what you want to deliver and that's your product, don't become serious and deliver like over education on somebody because that's what that person is particularly asking for. Like, you're probably not the best clinician for them. So I hope that answers your question. Nick, I'm gonna toss this one to you from Kenneth, because I think this one you could support a lot on. You're coaching a lot of therapists and clinicians all the time. So Kenneth's a fresh out of school grad, and basically the way that he wants to practice is very different from the way that his clinic delivers their practice, or how they've set up their structure. Like, what should Kenneth do? How does he navigate his way around that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually get asked this question a lot. I don't think it's easy, number one, because I always, and I wrote a post about it, I know recently, maybe a week ago or something like that. Like, I don't believe that you can change somebody's core values ever, right? The only way values can change is if that particular person discovers it themselves, right? And I think, if you're working in a company that maybe doesn't quite align with your values and the way you see, how you should operate and treat your clients and all that kind of stuff, then you should always lead the way you wish to be led, right? Which is, express yourself in what you value. Your tribe will emerge, again, one by one, whether that's your clients, whether that's a colleague, and then maybe over time, maybe that's also, the clinic owner in the company as well. But you're not going to be able to confront somebody, whether that's your boss, your clinic owner, or whatever, and trying to convince them to see things your way, because, everything that they've done in their life has created their values. You know what I mean? And same with yourself. And you're not going to be able to blend those two in a way that is easy. You can't change how somebody perceives the world in front of them. What you can do is continue to lead with your own values no matter what, right? And again, that's not easy sometimes. And, but again, I always say, like, you try to inspire one at a time. Mm-hmm. One by one, you will build a tribe. Right. And, it doesn't have to be fast, right? It could be slow. And as long as you're staying true to yourself, I think you're always going to be happy no matter what. Right. So.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Kenneth. I hope that answers your question, gives you some insight onto, some of the way you should be thinking and just pretty much a thought-provoking dialogue that you're going to have with yourself and how to navigate around that. Okay, cool. I want to jump to 2 more questions here before we wrap up. So Malik, thanks for tossing that question back out. I think that we started to touch on it last week. I could tackle this one myself. So Malik's question just around, what is the future of our industry and rehab kind of look like between rehab, exercise prescription, and social media. So I think that we all probably are seeing that being more and more of a movement specialist is going to be extremely important. I think when we lived in a very, reactive space where everybody that was coming in was in, super acute pain and they're just trying to get out of pain, it was okay to be a little bit more passive. But as people are looking at us as the entry point of, I'm trying to perform at a higher level, I don't only want to get out of pain, but I want you to direct me to, getting back to work pain-free, and how do I take better care of my body at the office, or how do I play this sport at a higher level. I think that we all have to become better and better movement specialists. I think that at a time, rehabilitative care where we lived, and I guess where, personal training or coaching or athletic therapists lived was over here, and they're starting to definitely merge a lot more. You've obviously seen a lot of personal trainers doing more and more rehabilitative content and more rudimentary type of movement and exercises. And you can see us starting to, in our space, deliver and show more complex movements, more compound movements, and starting to live a little bit more in the world of strength and conditioning, because we actually know how important that is to health and performance and wellness and feeling good. So I think there's going to be a huge blend between hands-on manual therapy and movement. And I think that wave is already starting. And how that pertains to social media, I think that, this is only my personal opinion. I think that it's eventually going to get to the point where you have to have a page, or you're going to have content that lives somewhere where people can experience who you are before they come to the doors. Because every other clinical core therapist that they can choose, they probably have access to that. So they're seeing somebody else's unique value. You're going to have to be able to deliver and show your own on a platform that you created for people to go in and consume that content. Social media is the new website, Google search, back in the day, Yellow Pages or phone book, whatever that looks like, that is what it is now. And that's where the industry is going. So cool. There was another question here. Nick, if you want to answer this question real quick before I read this one. So there's a question on direct referrals and how do you measure that, and who should measure that?
How do you measure that, and who should? Okay. It depends on how the company's set up, obviously, and I think every company does things a little bit differently. Typically, as part of the customer journey and part of the experience is being able to have somebody at the front desk and to engage with the clients, and whether that's that first touch point on the front desk where they collect that information of whether you were referred by somebody, who you were referred by, and if we don't have that somebody in guest experience and customer experience, then you can always ask those questions yourself, right? The how to measure is not as important of why you measure it. How you measure it is, there's so many different ways you can measure it. You can create spreadsheets. It doesn't have to be that fancy or complicated at all, right? You can just simply ask every single, it could be through an intake, it could be through your front desk, it could be through yourself, it could be through when they leave, it could be through an email follow-up. It could, the touch points doesn't really matter. It's consistency of measuring that particular metric so that you can ensure that you're thanking the people that actually refer, and that who's referring particular clients, right? So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll wrap up with this one right here. Again, guys, will probably be another 2-3 minutes and we'll shut it down. So David, funny enough, you mentioned that, because so the 4% case study was actually supposed to be about Virgil, and Nick told me that nobody's going to know who that is and it's not going to hit. So don't talk about it. So it's funny that you said that. But basically, David's point is, We talked about Nike, big campaign like the Breaking Two, and it's not always the easiest for a smaller company or a startup to like align with that. It's just like so wide and like high level. How do I take that all the way down to how I'm building my practice? And your question was, or your point was around you listened to something that Virgil had mentioned or talked about, and he mentioned you should emphasize on one key point of your product, and like how do you start doing that and building that up? I think we touched on it on a couple of times. I think Jen brought a lot of color to that, where Jen realized, and I'm a tennis player. I value tennis. I want to work with people that play tennis, and then taking that tennis course builds a content strategy funnel, because what Jen will probably start doing is starting to either unpack what that course looked like in actually every aspect of the game, whether it's through a content strategy through social media, or an in-house content strategy, or a newsletter MailChimp send out to her clients that play tennis. But I'm going to focus on how I'm going to break down the serve, the shoulder mechanics of the serve. I'm going to talk about, torque. How do I use my torquing strength and rotational strength in order to deliver more velocity and force? Like, there can be an entire 3-month campaign just around breaking down all the nuances of tennis as a sport. And like that can be the piece of Jen's product that she unpacks for a really long time. So it's like, I think I've spoken loud and long enough to that community. I think they get it, and I've built a community around that. I'm going to move on from there. So I hope it answers your question, but I think you could unpack very small nuances of your product and go all the way down that rabbit hole until you feel like you don't have anything more to say before you move on to the next thing. So I hope that answered your questions, guys. Thank you again for another incredible episode. Jen, appreciate you jumping in here. I think this was like super valuable, even for me. I take things out of all of these conversations. So if you guys want to jump in the chat real quick, just if you found it valuable, let us know. You can just type valuable. We plan on doing more like this. So if this was valuable, this is probably going to be our pace for the next couple of weeks. We'll start to bring more and more folks on and unpack their personal brands and their stories. And Jen's story is going to speak to a lot of you. And the next person we bring on, they might talk about something that resonates with you personally even more. And that's probably the direction we're going to start going for the next couple of weeks. So appreciate you guys again spending your time with us. Another hour. We got a question today, Nick.
Yeah, it was great.
Somehow we figured it out. But thank you guys for jumping on. Same time next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Jen, thanks again for your time. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Signing off. Have a great rest of your week, all. Peace.
Peace.
See you guys.